Greetings everyone, this is the Rambling Collector, back here with another book review for all of you today. And today, I will be talking about the Chronicles of the Black Company by Glen and Cook. Strap yourselves in everyone, this is going to be a long one. Now, Chronicles of the Black Company actually encompasses the first 3 books of the Black Company series, those being The Black Company, Shadows Linger, and The White Rose. This one in general, I actually had a bit of trouble with at first. But considering that this is about 704 pages worth, this was definitely a nice long read. Though I will admit, at one point I did have to put it down because I was starting to get a little frustrated. But when I returned and finished it, I must say, I was very impressed. I like this series, and I figured for a bit of fun here today, I'm going to give my overall thoughts on each book out of this collected edition. So, with that being said, let us start with Book 1. So first up, we have Book 1, self-titled The Black Company. Now, this series itself, as a whole, is very interesting in the fact that it is a grimdark fantasy series with mixes of military fiction in there as well, because this all centers around a sword company, the last great company of Katovar, known as the Black Company, whom have had a very long history of mercenary contraction, various different groups that they fought with, armies that they have destroyed. But let's just say that the company's history is very long and bloody. But the book itself is written from the point of view character of the history writer and record keeper, as well as these company's medic, that being Croker. Now, Croker himself is actually a very fascinating character. I will not lie to you there. The way that he's written, he has these very lofty ideals about the company, the fact that they are family for each other. And Croker is just one of the many unique characters you have, the 2 wizards, Goblin and One-Eye, as well as the captain himself, the lieutenant. You even have a character in there named Elmo, which I'm not going to lie to you guys, that actually still makes me chuckle a little bit at the fact that there's a character named Elmo, as well as a character named Raven. They never really give actual names to these folks, just, I guess, nicknames in a way. But anyways, to continue on. So the Black Company themselves gets hired by these ethereal beings, known as the 10 who were taken, who were once part of a group that served the Dominator during a massive age of darkness. But now, a few of the taken have actually risen up, but the Dominator himself still sleeps, while his wife, the Lady, wages war. And among the 10 who were taken who have risen, you have the Lady, Soul Catcher, the Hanged Man, the Limper. All of them have very unique and rather terrifying names, if I'm going to be quite honest. Now, I will say this much. Compared to the rest of the series, the first book is a bit slow. It feels like it jumps from battle to battle. You never know what you're going to expect, and you feel a little bit lost. But it is the way that it is written, which makes it feel like it is crawling at a bit of a pace, at least until halfway through. Because as the company goes through, they recruit Raven, as well as a mute and deaf girl named Darling, who has a great amount of significance later on. But as they continue, you see them waging campaigns, fighting against the Limper, who was trying to rebel against the Lady, as well as even just these different twists and turns revolving around these conspiracies, these usurpers, conniving, as well as plans to resurrect the Dominator from a few within the Lady's circle, how they plan to betray her and reawaken the Dominator, whom apparently is still conscious whilst he is buried in the Barrowlands. And again, guys, this one was definitely a bit slower, but all in all, it wasn't as bad until after the halfway point, where it just started speeding up rapidly towards its final conclusion, because the Lady, as well as the Taken, are fighting against this army known as the Rebel. They're fighting against one another, going to town, and the company themselves takes major losses and wins wherever they can. But it all comes to a head at the city of Charm, which proceeds to show a massive amount of siege warfare, where the Taken ramp up across what looks like a pyramid in a way, or at least what is described as a pyramid, having different ranks as they rain down defenses against the forces of the rebel, trying to take them all out. And it was fascinating the way it was written, as Croker was not really there on the battlefield, but he was definitely observing alongside the lady. And speaking of Croker and the lady, the Croker originally has a few romantic fantasies about the lady, because he doesn't really know her, he has not really seen her. But he ends up writing all these little romantic stories that the company pretty much ribs him for. All of his comrades, they rib him for it, like they joke about it, how he has all those romantic fantasies about the lady. They tease him about being in love despite his older age. And I gotta admit, that's funny. I like that camaraderie between soldiers, which is why I like the Warhammer 40,000 books so much. Which, if you're interested to learn about those, I have a playlist available to, if you were curious to learn about that particular series. But let us move on to Book 2, Shadows Linger. Now, I will say this much. Shadows Linger was definitely where I got more addicted to reading The Black Company. The first book started it off, but I eagerly tore through Book 2 at the time, especially with its different story here. For one, Croker himself is still a major point of view character, but we also get the accounts of a young man known as Shed, living in the city of Juniper, who's really down on his luck, as he owes major debts to a lot of criminal elements within the city of Juniper, which is just rotting away. Meanwhile, there's this mysterious Blackstone fortress that is popping up across the hill. Nobody knows what it's about, who lives there, or how it just mysteriously appeared. But as the story progresses, you begin to learn more about it, as well as the actual terror surrounding it. So while with Croker, we do hear more about the company's advances going through different towns, accomplishing different things for the lady, and apparently it has been years between books 1 and 2. So they are still marching with the lady, dealing with major armies and stuff like that, dealing with the rebellion, but they're all moving towards Juniper through the Barrowland. And I will not lie to you guys. I am not really sure, but I feel like I have liked Shed's story more. But Croker was definitely still a good character, but Shed's story, how was all of them coalescing towards this one singular point, it was very well written. So this book definitely had a good mix of military action, mystery, but also a very somber conclusion by the end of it, which I will explain in a bit. So Croker and Shed, its stories, they start merging towards each other as they start moving towards the same place. While with Shed, he's trying to keep his business afloat and keep it from being bought by criminals, or else he and his mother would be kicked out to the streets. So he actually comes across a familiar face, Raven, as well as Darling, who had fled the Black Company from the end of the first book, due to the fact that they have apparently figured out that Darling herself is the reincarnation of the White Rose, that being a character who can actually take on the Taken, and the reason for that is explained in the third book. But Darling apparently has this unique ability to actually create a field around her, which nullifies all magic, which is anathema to the Taken, who are very magical beings in a way, very ethereal. But Shed, what he resorts to, is helping out Raven deliver bodies to this Black Fortress. But as the story progresses, you notice how the Black Fortress itself grows and grows, seemingly. How it grows bigger and bigger throughout. And it's inhabited not by people, but by these wraith-like beings who take these bodies and are apparently sacrificing them for one reason or another. Whilst Shed uses the gold taken from these catacombs, as well as from other people that he's pillaged it from, in order to pay off his debts and try to get his inn up and running again. All the while, he feels a great guilt on his conscience for doing these horrible acts. But it all comes to a head when everyone arrives at Juniper, and we come to find out that that Blackstone fortress was an attempt by the Dominator to reawaken, to escape from his imprisonment in the Barrowland, and reawaken to the living world once more, to unleash his terror. And the lady and all of her allies were going there to try to stop him. And these guys, along with the Black Company, are waging massive siege warfare, like we're talking catapults, siege towers, all of that, just to take down these nasty black wraiths as well as destroy the fortress. And they just keep marching forward over into it. And the way the battle was described was amazing to behold. I will not lie to you guys. I don't know much about siege warfare, but listening to how it was described by Croker in that point in time was amazing. It was terrifying. It was deadly. There were rocks and fires and arrows flying everywhere. It was absolute chaos. I can't even imagine how grim fantasy warfare must have been back then, but this definitely paints a very, very grim but very fascinating picture. However, what this culminates into, as well as the somber ending at this point, is that the captain actually suspects that the lady plans to betray the company. So during the final battle, when the lady actually goes to confront the Dominator, who had briefly managed to escape, at least in spiritual form, the company flees. But by this point, they are absolutely broken. Like, the company by this point is now without a lead and feeling like they are about to be tracked down by the lady herself in vengeance for desertion from her forces, which is a reasonable fear considering how powerful the lady actually is. But regardless, this definitely ended on a somber note for the company, being at one of their lowest points. And I gotta say, them choosing to fight against the lady by the end of this, by siding with Darling, aka the White Rose, choosing to follow her on her quest to defeat the Taken, this one had a very somber note to it. And I will say, Glen Cook did a fantastic job with writing this one, how both of these points of view culminated into one major story. I feel like he has a talent for that, which I will get further into with Book 3. Speaking of which... And finally, we have Book 3, The White Rose, the last book of this 3-book collection. Now, I will not lie to you guys. When I started Book 3, I had to put it down for a bit, because after reading Shadow's Linger and starting Book 3, I got a little frustrated. Because like I said, the book itself has a good writing style, but it is very slow paced. So I had to put the book down for a bit, just so I could come back to it later after finishing a few smaller books, which I did, and when I came back to it, I was able to finish it very quickly. Because after taking a break from it, I noticed just how quickly Book 3 was moving. Now, the synopsis of this one is that by Book 3, continuing from Book 2, the company is now really down on its luck by this point. They are at their lowest. They're trapped on all sides. They're being pursued by the Taken. Their former employers, I should say. But they have Darling, the White Rose. As she grows older and gets stronger, her nullifying field that she creates gets a lot wider. But by this point, the company is now trapped in what is called the Hole, this massive little underground, literal hole in the ground that they've converted into an underground base where they converse and try to plan out some plan of attack to fight back, to take on the Taken. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this one was definitely the most rapid paced. But while Croker still maintains his status as the main point of view character, we actually get another point of view through letters of a character known as Bowmans, a wizard as well as excavator, as he investigates things of the Barrowland, the place where the Taken were buried long ago. The Dominator and the 10 who were taken were all buried there, and he acts as a sort of, not a scavenger, but, what's the word I'm looking for? A historian. He excavates through the Barrowland, finding these old trinkets, assembling armor. He wants to learn more about that time of the domination. Not to mention his own magical powers really comes into play here. Bowmans himself is actually a very interesting character, especially with how he managed to communicate with the lady, or at least the spirit of her, as she was locked away in the barrow, right next to her husband, the Dominator. All of them were strapped down through spells and magics of ancient types, laid down by the initial White Rose who fought the Taken before, as Darling is essentially the reincarnation of that. However, as we progress through this one, we see how things are coming to a head once again, the same as it was in Book 2. Because as Kroger continuously gets these letters, these passages, all written in these nice little oilskin packets to prevent damage, each and every time they paint a picture of Bowmans growing more and more desperate as this comet appears, which signals that the Taken themselves would be able to rise once again during this time. And as we continue onward, we do see how the Taken themselves actually emerged, actually escaped from the Barrowland, how they became revived in a way, how they were unbound. And I will not lie to you guys, the build-up to the final battle was immensely well done. And we also get a nice little bit more of a relationship drama between Kroger and the lady, as we see that these two do care about each other to some degree, but there's always that friction, the fact that at one point they were enemies, and there's always that hesitancy because the lady is ancient, and Kroger himself, while an old man, he still harbors some feelings towards her, but it was overshadowed by his fear of her, knowing how powerful and how ruthless she can be, especially after Book 1 when she is revealed in her personal history to have killed her sisters and taken their name for herself. And even when they took on Soulcatcher, essentially the lady took delight in killing another one of her sisters. But we do see how these two do care about each other in some way. In fact, the lady keeps begging Kroger to come back and be her history writer, to write out their story of the Taken, essentially being her analyst in a way. And I won't lie, this story was gripping from start to finish. I actually liked it. Not to mention the little twist at the end about the plane of fear itself, that it is not in fact a desert, but it is in fact the resting place of an even greater evil than the Dominator himself. There is in fact a creature from a different dimension that is a guardian, a warden of this ancient evil, and it is kept buried beneath the sands for years and years. And as a matter of fact, these storms that are produced around the plane of fear, what they call change storms, where things are morphed and changed into some demonic form, these are actually the dreams of that ancient evil that still slumbers and is still imprisoned to this very day. Not to mention Bowmans himself, astrally projecting himself into the Barrowland, seeing all these ancient evils, these ancient armies that are clamoring to be free, including, God forbid, a dragon of all things. The White Rose was definitely a very gripping final conclusion to this little arc of the story. And how it all reacts, how it all bridges together, was very well done. Glen did a fantastic job bringing it all together. However, by the end of it, all the major players, the captain and the lieutenant, are both killed. The captain was actually killed way back in Book 2, but the lieutenant, the second in command, the one who took control of the company by Book 3, is now also killed during the final battle, where they actually face off against the Dominator himself, resurrected, still weak, but resurrected, with the aid of the Taken, Darling, all of them. All of it comes together where the Taken themselves are taken out of the picture. The Dominator is defeated once more, and Darling herself is actually depowered in a way. All of it comes to that type of a head. And I will say, the way that it was wrapped up is once again very somber, because by this point the company themselves splits up a little, with Kroger taking the remains of the Black Company to the ancient city of Catalvar, which would be explained in the next book. And if you were to ask me, I feel like if you were to stop here, I would not blame you. But this essentially encompasses one single arc. 704 pages. All three of these books put together encompasses a single arc of this tale. But with all that being said, let's move on to the final score. So, if I were to give it a fair score, I would give Chronicles of the Black Company, this whole collection of the first three books of the series, a good 7.5 out of 10. My major issues with it were, of course, the pacing being a bit slow at times, as well as, of course, having to take a break due to frustration. But, all in all, that does not make this a bad series. I would say if you want a good bit of fantasy military, or if you just want a very grim, dark fantasy story of questions of what is right and wrong, the morally gray aspects of the company doing evil things, but questioning whether they do is right, but also ancient evils, all of that good stuff, all rolled into one, or even just the camaraderie of soldiers, I would definitely recommend picking up this arc, Chronicles of the Black Company. Now, if you were to ask me, would I pursue this series more in the future? I would say maybe. I'll have to wait and see once I finish more of the books that I still have not read yet in my collection. That's right, folks, my TBR pile is still very high. But all in all, I do say check this one out if you're up for a grimdark fantasy, or if you've maybe heard of this series but haven't checked it out yet. I would recommend it. Don't let my opinion stir you. Go and see it for yourself. Maybe you'll have your own opinions. But once again, you guys, thank you so much for listening to this crazy man's ramblings. And if you'd like to hear more of the books that I've talked about, click on the link to my Book Rambles playlist you'll see here. But if you have any other suggestions, please feel free to let me know that as well. And more importantly, you guys, thank you once again for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off for now. Have an awesome day, fellow readers.